Jin Park's heart thundered in her chest as the spacecraft completed its docking sequence with a gentle thud. After 5 years of preparations, humanity had finally joined the Galactic Confederation, and she was the first human xenobiologist to set foot on Nexus Station. The massive space hub served as neutral ground where dozens of alien species coexisted, traded, and shared knowledge. "Final airlock pressure equalization complete," announced the ship's eye. "You may now disembark." Jin smoothed down her blue uniform, the Earth Diplomatic Corps' insignia gleaming on her chest. She had practiced this moment countless times, yet nothing could prepare her for the reality of being the first human many of these aliens would ever meet. The airlock hissed open. Jin took a deep breath of the slightly sweet-smelling air and stepped forward onto the polished floor of Nexus Station. The reception area bustled with activity. Beams of various shapes, sizes, and colors moved about with purpose. Some floated rather than walked. Others slithered. A few seemed to phase in and out of visibility as they moved. "Dr. Park, welcome to Nexus Station." Jin turned toward the melodious voice. Before her stood a tall, slender alien with shimmering blue-violet skin that caught the light like polished opal. Though clearly not human, the being had a face with features that Jin could recognize. Large, luminescent eyes that shifted between purple and green, a small nose-like structure, and lips that curved into what appeared to be a smile. Delicate patterns swirled across the alien skin, changing subtly as Jin watched. "I am Nera," the alien said, placing a 6-fingered hand against her chest in greeting. "I will be your liaison during your stay with us." Jin mimicked the gesture. "Thank you for your welcome. I'm honored to represent Earth." "The honor is ours," Nera replied. "Humans have been a subject of great interest since we discovered your transmissions. Your biology is unique." Something in the way Nera hesitated made Jin curious, but before she could ask, Nera continued. "Your quarters have been prepared according to human specifications. Would you prefer to rest, or would you like a tour of the diplomatic section?" "A tour, please," Jin said. "I've been sitting in that ship for 3 weeks. I need to stretch my legs." Nera's eyes flickered with what might have been amusement. "Very well. Follow me." As they walked, Jin marveled at the station's architecture. Sweeping arches supported transparent ceilings that revealed the star-speckled blackness of space. Plants from 100 worlds grew in carefully maintained gardens. Soft music that seemed to come from nowhere filled certain areas, changing as they moved from section to section. "This station was constructed 200 years ago," Nara explained. "It serves as both diplomatic headquarters and cultural exchange center for the Confederation's 37 member species." 38 now, Jin said with a smile. "Indeed," Nara agreed. "Humans are the newest addition to our family of civilizations." They passed what appeared to be a market, where beings exchanged goods and services. Jin noticed how some aliens communicated through gestures, others through sounds, and still others through changing colors on their bodies. "How do you all understand each other?" Jin asked. Nara touched a small device at her throat. "Universal translators. They analyze language patterns and convert them to the recipient's preferred communication method. Yours was calibrated before your arrival." Jin nodded. She had been briefed about the technology, but seeing it in action was impressive. "The diplomatic dining hall is ahead," Nara said. "Perhaps you would join me for the evening meal. It would provide an opportunity to discuss your mission here in more detail." "I'd like that," Jin replied. The dining hall was a large, circular room with tables of various heights and designs to accommodate different body types. Jin followed Nara to a table that seemed suited for humanoid shapes. A server approached, a hovering robotic device that extended serving attachments as needed. 2 standard nutrition packages, Nara requested. 1 human-compatible, 1 Lumiri. The server departed and returned moments later with 2 plates. Jin's contained what looked like Earth food, a protein source, vegetables, and some kind of grain. It smelled appetizing. The kitchen synthesizes meals based on biological requirements, Nora explained. Your file indicated these foods would be acceptable. It looks wonderful, Jin said, taking a tentative bite. The flavors were familiar enough to be comforting, yet slightly different in a way she couldn't quite identify. As they ate, Nara asked questions about Earth culture, politics, and science. Jin answered as best she could, conscious of her role as Earth's representative. And what about human families? Nora asked. Our research indicates strong pair bonding tendencies among your species. Yes, most humans form committed relationships, Jin explained. We typically live in family units, couples who may choose to have children together. Nara's skin rippled with interest. And these children, they are produced through biological reproduction. Yes, Jin said, though some couples adopt children or use various reproductive technologies if needed. Fascinating, Nara said. And the basic method of reproduction, how does that work for humans? Jin explained the fundamentals of human reproduction, trying to keep her explanation scientific and clear. As she described pregnancy, she noticed Nara's skin color shifting rapidly, the patterns becoming erratic. Wait, Nara interrupted, setting down her eating utensil. Humans really use that internal organ for breeding. And you carry your offspring inside your body for 9 months. The alien's voice had risen slightly, drawing attention from nearby diners. Yes, Jin said, suddenly self-conscious. Is that unusual? Nara's large eyes blinked several times in rapid succession. It's just, most advanced species have evolved beyond such methods. The risk, the resource expenditure, the physical toll. It's considered quite primitive. Jin felt her cheeks warm. Primitive. Our method has served us well for millions of years. Of course, Nara said quickly, her skin settling into an apologetic blue pattern. I meant no offense. It's simply unexpected. We have much to learn from each other. Jin nodded, though she felt a lingering discomfort. This was why she was here, to bridge cultural gaps and foster understanding. Still, being called primitive on her first day wasn't exactly the welcome she had anticipated. Tell me, she asked, trying to move the conversation forward. How do Lemuri reproduce? Nara's skin brightened. We cultivate crystalline matrices that house our genetic material. When 2 or more Lemuri wish to create offspring, we contribute energy patterns that fuse within the matrix. The new consciousness develops safely outside the body, with no risk to the parents. That sounds efficient, Jin said, trying to be diplomatic. It is, Nara agreed. Though I must admit, your method sounds quite interesting. Jin awoke to the persistent buzzing of her communicator. She had barely slept, still adjusting to the station's 30-hour day cycle. Groggily, she reached for the device on her nightstand. The screen displayed hundreds of notification alerts in the Confederation's standard script, which her translator rendered into English. What in the world? She muttered, scrolling through the messages. Most were meeting requests from various scientists and diplomats aboard the station. Others were interview requests from what appeared to be news organizations from dozens of worlds. Her door chimed. Jin pulled on her uniform jacket and pressed the access panel. The door slid open to reveal Nara, the Lemuri skin now a muted shade of blue that Jin hadn't seen before. Good morning, Dr. Park, Nara said, her voice softer than the previous day. May I enter? I believe I owe you an explanation. Jin stepped aside, gesturing the alien in. Does that explanation include why my communicator hasn't stopped buzzing since I woke up? Nara's skin rippled with what Jin was beginning to recognize as embarrassment. Yes, I shared our conversation about human reproduction with a few colleagues. I didn't realize it would spread so quickly through the information networks. Jin sat heavily on the edge of her bed. You're telling me that basic human biology has become breaking news across the Confederation? I'm afraid so, Nara said. Most species find internal gestation unusual. The concept has generated significant interest. Unusual. Jin raised an eyebrow. You called it primitive yesterday. I apologize for my insensitivity, Nara said. By Confederation standards, internal reproduction is considered an early evolutionary stage that most spacefaring species have moved beyond. The Lumi merge energy patterns, the Tassi release spores into specialized environments, the Vol transfer consciousness into artificially grown bodies. Jin felt her defenses rising. Just because it's different doesn't make it wrong. Humans have reached the stars just like everyone else. Of course, Nara agreed quickly. No one is questioning humanity's achievements. It's simply unexpected. The physical vulnerability it creates, the resources it requires, the pain involved. Most species view such methods as unnecessarily risky. Jin crossed her arms. Our method may seem primitive to you, but it's created strong family bonds that are central to human culture. The shared experience of birth, the physical connection between parent and child, these things have shaped our societies for thousands of years. She paused, noticing how intently Nara was listening. The alien's skin had shifted to a deep purple with flecks of gold, a pattern Jin hadn't seen before. That's actually fascinating, Nara said softly. The connection between biological processes and cultural development. The Lumiri have always separated reproduction from emotional bonding. Our family units are formed through conscious choice, not biological necessity. Different doesn't mean better or worse, Jin said, her irritation fading. Just different paths. Nara nodded. A wise perspective. I wish others shared it. The Science Council has requested your participation in a formal symposium about human reproduction. They wish to learn more directly from you, rather than through rumors and speculation. Jin sighed. This wasn't how she had imagined her diplomatic mission beginning. She had prepared detailed presentations on Earth's ecosystems, medical advances, and artistic achievements. Instead, she would be explaining the birds and the bees to an auditorium of aliens. When is this symposium? Tomorrow, Nara said. I can help you prepare if you wish. Jin's communicator buzzed again. She glanced at it and saw a message from Earth's diplomatic corps. Apparently, news of the situation had reached home. I'd appreciate that, Jin said. But first, I need to respond to some of these messages and clear things up with my superiors. There's something else, Nara said, her skin shifting to a nervous pattern of swirling blues and greens. A delegation from the Vol Collective has requested a private meeting with you. They're concerned about humanity's addition to the Confederation, given what they now know about your biology. Concerned. Jin frowned. What does that mean? The Vol are extremely risk-averse, Nara explained. They believe that species with primitive biological processes might make similarly primitive decisions in politics and technology. They've suggested a probationary period for Earth rather than full membership. Jin felt her face flush with anger. That's absurd. They can't judge an entire species based on reproductive biology. I agree, Nara said quickly. And many others do too. But the Vol hold significant influence in the Confederation. Their concerns cannot be dismissed outright. Jin took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. This was exactly the kind of diplomatic challenge she had been trained for, even if the specifics were unexpected. All right, she said finally. Set up the meeting with the Vol, and I'll prepare for this symposium. But I want to be clear. I won't let Earth be treated as a lesser member of the Confederation because we reproduce differently. Nara's skin brightened. I believe you will make an excellent case for your people, Dr. Park. And for what it's worth, I find human resilience admirable. To accept such physical vulnerability for the sake of your offspring, there's a certain courage in that which many species might have lost. Jin looked up, surprised by the comment. Thank you, Nara. Now, shall we address your most urgent messages before beginning preparations? Nara asked, gesturing to Jin's still buzzing communicator. As they worked through the messages, Jin found her irritation giving way to determination. She hadn't come to Nexus Station to defend human reproduction, but if that's what it took to secure Earth's place in the Confederation, then she would do it. And perhaps in the process, she might help these advanced aliens understand that different wasn't always primitive. Sometimes it was just different. By midday, Jin had spoken with Earth's diplomatic corps, reassuring them that the situation was under control. She had also drafted an outline for her presentation at the symposium, with Nera's help in understanding what aspects would be most confusing to non-human species. The Science Council chamber will be filled to capacity, Nera warned as they finished their preparations. Word has spread further than I anticipated. Jin nodded, steeling herself for what promised to be the strangest presentation of her career. Jin stood backstage in the Science Council chamber, peering through a small gap in the curtains. The massive auditorium was filled beyond capacity. Aliens of all descriptions crowded the seats, stood in the aisles, and hovered near the ceiling. Some species she recognized from her briefings, the crystalline Lumiri like Nara, the gaseous Tassi contained in floating orbs, the insectoid vole with their compound eyes. Many others were completely unfamiliar. "Are you ready?" Nara asked, her skin glowing a supportive shade of gold. Jin took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be to explain human reproduction to an audience of aliens. Remember, be direct but not defensive," Nera advised. "Many will be shocked, but most are simply curious." Jin nodded and stepped onto the stage as her name was announced. The murmuring of the crowd, a mixture of clicks, hums, whistles, and words, fell to a hush. A massive display screen activated behind her, connected to her presentation device. "Greetings," Jin began, her voice amplified throughout the chamber. "I am Dr. Jin Park, xenobiologist from Earth. I understand there has been significant interest in human reproductive biology, and I am here to provide accurate information." She activated the first image, a simple diagram of human reproductive organs. "Humans are a binary sex species," she explained. "Though our gender expressions are diverse, most humans have either male or female reproductive systems." Jin noticed several aliens leaning forward with interest. Others seemed to recoil slightly. "Human reproduction begins with the joining of genetic material," she continued, advancing to the next slide. "A male gamete, called a sperm cell, fertilizes a female gamete, called an egg cell." So far, this seemed to be familiar territory for most species. Many had similar methods of genetic recombination, even if the details differed. What happens next is where human reproduction differs from many Confederation species, Jin said, bringing up an image of a developing embryo. The fertilized egg implants in the uterus, an internal organ in female humans, and develops there for approximately 40 weeks. A ripple of what Jin interpreted as discomfort moved through the audience. She pressed on. "The embryo develops inside a protective sac filled with fluid. It receives nutrients and oxygen through a specialized organ called the placenta, which connects to the mother's bloodstream." Jin cycled through images showing fetal development. The audience's reactions became more pronounced. Some aliens were visibly disturbed, while others seemed fascinated. As the fetus grows, the mother's body adapts to protect and support it. Her organs shift position, her blood volume increases, and her immune system modifies to prevent rejection of the genetically different fetus. A tall, spindly alien with reflective eyes stood up. "This process, it causes physical changes to the female's body." "Yes," Jin confirmed. "Temporary changes during pregnancy, and some permanent ones afterward." "And the female consents to these alterations?" the alien asked, sounding incredulous. "Yes," Jin said firmly. "Human women who choose to become pregnant understand the physical changes involved." Another alien, one of the vole that Nera had warned her about, raised a limb. "And the exit process? How does the offspring leave this internal chamber?" Jin took a deep breath. This was the part that had generated the most shocked reactions during her preparation with Nera. "Through a process called birth," she explained, showing a clinical diagram. The uterus contracts, pushing the baby through the birth canal and out of the body. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds that Jin's translator couldn't fully process. The vole representative stood fully upright, his exoskeleton clicking loudly. "This is barbaric," he declared. "Such a primitive, dangerous process. How can a species that subjects itself to such biological trauma be considered advanced enough for Confederation membership?" Jin felt her face flush, but before she could respond, Nara stepped onto the stage beside her. "Point of order," Nara said formally. "Biological processes are not valid criteria for Confederation membership. The Charter specifically protects biological diversity." The vole's compound eyes glinted. "Diversity is one thing. Risk is another. A species that evolved with such dangerous reproductive methods may apply similar risk tolerance to technological development or diplomatic decisions." Jin stepped forward. "With respect, that logic is flawed. Human reproduction evolved over millions of years based on our planet's specific conditions. Our decision-making processes for technology and diplomacy are based on careful analysis and risk assessment, just like yours." She advanced to a new slide showing human medical facilities. "Furthermore, we've developed extensive medical technologies to minimize risks associated with pregnancy and birth. Our maternal and infant mortality rates have decreased dramatically over our history." A floating orb containing what appeared to be colored gas approached the stage. "I represent the Tassi Consortium," came a melodious voice. "We find the human method fascinating rather than concerning. Evolution takes many paths. The vole moved reproduction outside the body. Humans improved internal processes. Both approaches solved the same problem differently." The chamber hummed with discussion. Jin noticed the audience seemed split, with some agreeing with the vole's assessment and others supporting the Tassi perspective. "If I may," Jin said, reclaiming attention, "there's an aspect of human reproduction that goes beyond the biological process. The shared experience of pregnancy and birth creates powerful bonds between parents and children. These bonds have shaped human culture, values, and social structures in ways that may be different from yours, but are no less advanced." She showed images of human families, parents holding newborns, children growing, multi-generational gatherings. "Our method may seem inefficient or risky to you, but it has given us something precious, a deep connection to our offspring and to each other. This connection has driven us to create art, literature, and music. It has inspired us to build societies that protect our young. It has motivated us to reach for the stars, not just for ourselves, but for future generations." Jin noticed that Nara was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, the Lumiri's skin shifting through patterns of blue, purple, and gold. "Humans are different," Jin concluded. "Our biology is different. Our culture is different, but different doesn't mean less advanced. It just means we found another path to the same stars that you all reached." The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then, starting with the Tassi representative, a rhythmic sound began that Jin's translator identified as the Confederation equivalent of applause. Not everyone joined in. The vole delegation remained pointedly still, but many did. Jin felt a wave of relief wash over her. She hadn't changed every mind, but she had made her case. As the symposium concluded, Nara approached her. "That was unexpectedly moving," the Lumiri said. "I think many here saw humanity in a new light today." Jin smiled, exhausted but satisfied. "Including you." Nara's skin rippled with a pattern Jin hadn't seen before. "Yes," the alien admitted. "I'm beginning to understand that what I first saw as primitive might instead be profound." Jin sat in the observation lounge, watching the slow dance of ships arriving and departing from Nexus Station. A week had passed since the symposium, and while the initial frenzy about human reproduction had calmed, she still received curious looks from aliens she passed in the corridors. Some even approached her with questions, which she answered as patiently as she could. "May I join you?" came a familiar voice. Jin looked up to see Nera standing beside her table, the Lumiri's skin shimmering with soft blue patterns that Jin had come to associate with friendly curiosity. "Please do," Jin said, gesturing to the empty seat across from her. Nera sat down with fluid grace. "I hoped to find you here. I have a proposal that might interest you." "What kind of proposal?" Jin asked, taking a sip of her tea. "The station houses a biological archives section that most visitors never see," Nara explained. "It contains interactive displays of reproductive systems from across the Confederation. I thought you might like to visit, both to learn and perhaps to help update the human section, which is incomplete." Jin smiled. "I'd like that very much." They made their way through less traveled corridors of the station, eventually reaching a massive circular chamber with a domed ceiling. The room was divided into sections, each dedicated to a different species or group of related species. Holographic displays activated as they approached, showing detailed biological processes in 3 dimensions. "This is amazing," Jin said, watching the reproduction cycle of a gaseous species play out before her. Colorful clouds merged, exchanged particles, and then separated, leaving behind smaller clouds that gradually grew. The archives were established to foster understanding between member species, Nara explained. "Knowledge reduces fear of differences." They moved through the exhibits, Nara explaining details that the automated systems didn't cover. Jin was fascinated by the incredible diversity. Some species reproduced through division, others through complex metamorphosis, and still others through methods that defied easy categorization. "Here's the human section," Nara said eventually, stopping before a small display that showed only basic information. "It's certainly minimal," Jin observed. "Would you be willing to help update it?" Nara asked. "Your presentation was informative, but having a more comprehensive display would benefit future visitors." Jin agreed, and they spent the next hour working with the archive systems to create a more accurate representation of human reproduction. As they worked, Jin noticed Nara watching her with unusual intensity. "Is something on your mind?" Jin asked finally. Nara's skin shifted to a thoughtful purple. "I've been considering what you said at the symposium, about the connection between reproduction and human culture. Among the Lumiri, reproduction is purely functional. We create offspring when needed, without physical or emotional investment in the process." "That sounds very efficient," Jin said neutrally. "Efficiency isn't everything," Nara replied, surprising Jin. "Since your presentation, I've been researching human concepts like family and parenthood. They're fascinating constructs that we have no direct parallel for." Jin leaned against a display console. "It's hard to imagine society without those concepts. They're so fundamental to how we organize ourselves." "That's precisely what interests me," Nara said. "The link between biology and social structure. The Lumiri have struggled with maintaining cultural cohesion as we've advanced technologically. Some theorists wonder if we lost something important when we divorced reproduction from physical experience." Jin considered this. It's not just the physical experience that matters. It's the commitment, the shared responsibility, the generational knowledge passed down. Nara was about to respond when an alarm suddenly blared throughout the archives. A computerized voice announced, "Emergency in Reproduction Center Alpha. All qualified personnel report immediately." Nara's skin paled to an almost white shade. This is serious. The reproduction center houses developing offspring of 15 different species. "Take me there," Jin said, her training as a xenobiologist kicking in. "I might be able to help." They rushed through the station, following emergency pathways that Jin hadn't known existed. They arrived at a large, sealed facility where several aliens were gathered outside, their body language conveying distress even across species boundaries. A tall, insectoid vole, the same one who had challenged Jin at the symposium, was issuing orders to station personnel. He turned as Jin and Nara approached. "The human has no business here," he said sharply. "Dr. Park is a qualified xenobiologist," Nara countered. What's happening? A station engineer explained. Environmental control system failure. Temperature and atmospheric conditions are fluctuating wildly throughout the center. We've stabilized some sections, but 3 remain critical, including the vole nursery. The vole scientists' antennae twitched with obvious distress. Our eggs require precise conditions. Any deviation could be catastrophic. Jin stepped forward. Let me see the system diagnostics. After a moment's hesitation, the vole gestured to a display. Jin studied the readings quickly. You're approaching this wrong, she said. You're trying to fix each environment separately, but they're all connected. The system is overcompensating each time you adjust one section. What do you suggest? The engineer asked. A buffer zone, Jin said. In human pregnancy, the amniotic fluid acts as a buffer, protecting the developing child from minor external changes. We need to create an artificial buffer layer between each nursery section, a zone that can absorb fluctuations without passing them on. That could work, the engineer admitted, looking to the vole for approval. The insectoid alien's compound eyes studied Jin for a long moment. Implement the human suggestion, he said finally. We have little to lose. The next 2 hours were a blur of activity as Jin worked with the station's engineers to modify the environmental systems. They created buffer zones using available materials and reprogrammed control algorithms to accommodate the new design. Gradually, the readings stabilized. One by one, the warning lights on the control panel turned from red to green. The vole nursery is back within acceptable parameters, announced an engineer. All egg chambers report normal conditions. The vole scientist approached Jin, his exoskeleton clicking softly. Your solution was unexpected. You applied principles from human internal gestation to our external system. Different problems, similar solutions, Jin said with a smile. Evolution finds many paths to the same destination. The vole's antennae twitched in what Jin hoped was agreement. Perhaps I was hasty in my judgment of human biology. There may be advantages to your method that I failed to consider. After the crisis passed and the necessary repairs were underway, Jin and Nara returned to the observation lounge. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. You impressed many people today, Nara said finally, especially the vole. They rarely admit when they're wrong. Jin shrugged. I just applied basic principles. The irony isn't lost on me that it was our primitive reproductive system that provided the solution. Nara's skin glowed with warm colors. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about commitment and responsibility. The Lumiri create offspring, but don't raise them the way humans do. Our young are educated by designated caregivers, not their genetic contributors. Neither system is inherently better, Jin said. They're just different approaches. Yes, but I wonder what we might learn from each other, Nara replied, her skin pattern shifting to one Jin hadn't seen before, complex swirls of gold and blue that seemed almost contemplative. Your way creates deep bonds but carries risks. Our way is safe but perhaps lacks something important. Jin smiled, feeling that for the first time since her arrival, she and Nara were truly beginning to understand each other. 3 months had passed since Jin's arrival on Nexus Station. What began as an awkward diplomatic mission centered around human reproduction had evolved into something much more meaningful. Jin stood at the podium in the Grand Assembly Chamber, addressing representatives from all 38 member species of the Galactic Confederation, including a delegation from Earth. Biological diversity isn't just a scientific fact. It's the foundation of innovation, Jin said, her voice steady despite her nerves. When different species approach the same challenges in different ways, we all benefit from the variety of solutions. Jin glanced at Nara, who stood nearby, the Lumiri's skin glowing with supportive patterns of gold and blue. Over the past months, they had worked together to create a comprehensive cultural exchange program that went beyond mere biological curiosity. Humanity's methods of reproduction once seemed primitive to many here, Jin continued. But during the recent crisis in Reproduction Center Alpha, It was the principles of human gestation that helped save offspring from 15 different species. Different doesn't mean better or worse. It simply means another path to explore. The chamber remained silent, all attention focused on her words. I propose the establishment of a permanent biological diversity council within the Confederation, not just to study our differences, but to celebrate how they make us stronger together. Earth is honored to offer the first research facility on our planet, where representatives from all member species will be welcome. When Jin finished her address, the chamber erupted in the Confederation's version of applause, a rhythmic sound that reverberated through the vast space. The Earth delegation looked pleased, and even the Vol representatives joined in the approval. After the formal proceedings ended, Jin found a quiet moment with Nera in the observation lounge, where they had spent so many hours talking. Your proposal was accepted unanimously, Nera said. Even the Vols supported it, which is remarkable given their initial position. Jin smiled. I think saving their nursery changed some minds. Nothing breaks down prejudice quite like seeing value in difference. Speaking of difference, Nera said, her skin shifting to a pattern Jin had come to recognize as nervous anticipation. I've been approved as the Lumiri representative to your Earth facility. Jin's eyes widened. You're coming to Earth. That's wonderful news. I must admit I'm both excited and apprehensive, Nera said. I've studied your world extensively, but experiencing it directly will be quite different. I'll help you adjust, Jin promised. My family is looking forward to meeting you. Nera's skin rippled with curiosity. Your family unit. They are genetic relations. Yes, Jin said. My parents, my sister and her husband, and their new baby, my nephew Ta. He was born just last month. A new human, Nera said softly. Created through the process we've discussed so much. Jin nodded. Would you like to meet them when we arrive? I know they'd love to meet you. I would be honored, Nera replied. I've developed a particular interest in human family structures since our conversations began. 2 weeks later, after a journey that took them through 3 jump points, Jin and Nera arrived at Earth. Jin watched as Nera experienced her first view of the blue planet from orbit, the Lumiri's skin shifting through patterns of wonder and delight. It's even more beautiful than the images, Nera whispered. After clearing diplomatic protocols, they traveled to Jin's hometown, a coastal city where her family had lived for generations. Jin's parents welcomed Nera with the warm hospitality that Jin had tried to explain was common among humans. We've heard so much about you, Jin's mother said, offering Nera a specially prepared meal that met her biological requirements. Jin tells us you've been a wonderful guide on the station. Your daughter has taught me far more than I've taught her, Nera replied, her translator conveying the warmth in her voice. The next day, Jin took Nera to visit her sister's home. Mina greeted them at the door, her 1-month-old son cradled in her arms. Nera, this is my sister Mina and her son Ta, Jin said. Nera's skin shifted to a reverent shade of deep blue. May I observe more closely? She asked hesitantly. Mina smiled. Of course. Nera moved closer, studying the sleeping infant with obvious fascination. So small, she murmured. And he developed inside your body. Mina nodded. For 9 months. Would you like to hold him? Nera's skin flashed with surprise. Is that permitted? I have no experience with human infants. I'll show you how, Mina said, demonstrating the proper way to support the baby's head and body. With careful movements, Nera took the tiny human in her arms. Te's eyes opened briefly, regarding the alien face above him without fear, before closing again in sleep. He trusts completely, Nera observed, her voice barely above a whisper, without question or hesitation. Babies are like that, Mina said. They teach us trust before they learn words. Jin watched as Nera held her nephew, noticing how the Lumiri skin glowed with a pattern she had never seen before, a gentle pulsing light that seemed to emanate from within. Later, as they walked along the beach near Jin's family home, Nera was unusually quiet. "What are you thinking?" Jin asked finally. "About connections," Nera replied. "When I held your sister's child, I felt something I cannot fully describe. The Lumiri have no word for it." "What did it feel like?" Jin prompted. "Like understanding a truth without being told," Nera said. "Seeing your sister with her child, I finally comprehended what you meant about family bonds. It's not just biological. It's something more profound." Jin nodded. "That's why we held onto our primitive methods for so long. The physical connection creates something that goes beyond genetics." "The Lumiri once had something similar, long ago," Nara said, her voice tinged with a new emotion. "Before we prioritized efficiency above all else. Some of our oldest records speak of bonds between creators and created that were more than functional. I wonder what we lost in our pursuit of advancement." "It's not too late to explore those connections again," Jin suggested. "That's what our exchange program is about, learning from each other's differences." Nera's skin brightened. "Yes, perhaps just as you've learned from our technological advances, we might learn from your emotional wisdom." They stood watching the sunset over Earth's ocean, a human and an alien, representatives of vastly different worlds, joined by understanding that had grown from initial misunderstanding. "When I first explained human reproduction to you, you were shocked," Jin said with a smile. "Now you've held a human baby." "The universe is full of surprises," Nera replied, her skin glowing with warmth. "What seems primitive at first glance often reveals deeper wisdom upon closer inspection. That's the true value of diversity, not just tolerance of difference, but appreciation of what each path can teach us." As darkness fell and stars appeared in the sky, Jin thought about how far they had come, from awkward cultural misunderstandings to a friendship that bridged worlds. What began with a stunned alien asking, "Humans really use that thing for breeding?" had become something neither of them could have predicted. A genuine connection that transcended biology, culture, and the vast distances between their homeworlds. "Tomorrow I'll show you more of Earth," Jin promised. "And someday I hope you'll show me your world too." "I would like that," Nera said, her skin patterns matching the starry sky above them. "Very much."